awful, isn't it? Absolutely awful. 90% of people are going to slap on the bracketless kit. It's not too great. To a brand new gleaming bracketless setup. What do you think? In this video, we're going to be converting a bracketed stock old style pump pad into a bracketless style right here. This pretty much the same principles apply if you have a DDR and ITG and you want that kind of bracketless feel. You won't have the brackets here, nothing in the way of your feet. And also we're going to be countersinking screws as well to make sure everything is perfectly flat like this one here. So stay tuned and let's get going. Okay, so some things we'll need for this job. We need the brackets in which to put the acrylic arrows right here. These are official Andamiro acrylics, official Andamiro brackets. You can make these yourself if you go that route. Make them out of polycarbonate and not acrylic. They'll be a lot stronger. It's a mystery why they use acrylic, but there it is. I'll probably do a separate video on that. You'll need some screws. Screws go in the acrylics. And also you will need to upgrade something in your pad, which we'll talk about later. Depending how rusty your pad is, you may need some sanding tools. You may need some epoxy, something like that. Some paint, again, depending how rusty it is. Maybe some rust converter as well, rust remover. Some new sensors, why not? Some sensor channels, because the new sensors are actually not as high as the original ones, so you'll need sensor channels for your sensors. You may need an impact screwdriver and some tools to get rusty nuts and bolts out. Okay, let's continue. If you need official Andamiro parts like acrylics or frames, send me a message. I have access to get these. I can get these from official sources. It's pretty almost impossible to order official Andamiro parts. It's a bit of a mystery. So send me a message if you want some. I'll set you up with an order. So the first thing we're doing is removing all the brackets, all of these triangle brackets right here. They may be rusted on. If you're having some trouble removing them, then I'll link a video in the description below which will help you with rusty screws, rusty bolts, and make sure that you're not going to ruin any of your screws when taking this apart. Okay, not one stripped screw. Check it out. So I made a video on Fun Bob's. This is where I got the pad from. It's from a city called Coventry, and I swear no one in that city knows even what pump is. So you can see it has all the original modding. It hasn't been touched. The original sensors, everything is just original, untouched out of the factory. So the first thing, we're going to remove these metal frames here, but the L brackets are in the way, so that's these guys right here. These are secured on by 3 screws. It may be a bit rusty depending on the quality of your pad. Mine was sitting out in the rain, unfortunately, so it may be a bit of a battle, but at least we can work with a pretty bad example, so I'm sure yours will be looking a little bit better than this. When you're unscrewing these screws here, it's very easy to break these neon lights. They're so fragile, so it might be easier just to disconnect this and just leave it to the side. That way you don't accidentally break it. It's really easy to do. So we're going to take off all these L brackets on pretty much every arrow here. So it's quite interesting looking at some of these screws here from an original pump pad. You can see they almost look like wood screws. It's very different from DDR, considering they pretty much stole the DDR design. And even these screws way out here, these should be M6 machine screws, but this is just a regular old wood screw. It's absolutely terrible. I bet there's not even any threads in there that's worth using at all, sadly. But yeah, early Andamiro, eh? Yeah, it looks pretty rusty. Alright, well, that's one down. So all the L brackets are out. Okay, so we're just unplugging all the sensors now so we can free everything up. If you've never been in here before, then the sensor is pretty much just that little tab there. Pull it out. It'll look a little bit different in DDR. It's a little more fiddly in DDR actually. And then we need to undo 3 screws on each corner. So there's 2 screws here, one here, and that kind of clamps this to the metal frame into the pad. And then there's also one in the corner that you can get through this hole here. If it's quite rusted and filled up with dirt and debris, then again you can check out my other video on how to free that up and get these out. So sometimes these corner ones are a little tricky. What you can do is undo these two, and if you pull this up and away, you can see the hole's slightly bigger there. You have more access to get some penetrating grease in here, something like that, and then you can loosen this one up. This will be probably the hardest and most rusted one out of the three. Okay, moment of truth. That's been in there, almost guaranteed, about 24, 25 years. Look at that. Wow. So the old brackets here, you have a few options with these. You can actually make your own home pad with them. I mean, you have your old acrylics there. They don't have much use. You have these. Make your own home pad. Why not? Sounds like a pretty fun project. Failing that, you can probably sell the acrylics here and some of the sensors and sensor holders and scrap the rest. The choice is yours. They do tend to get very rusty though. It's certainly made from a very different material to what you normally see on the outside of the pad. So choice is yours with those. They'll probably look pretty bad if you live in a high humidity area or you sweat a lot into the pad. But this is where we start the cleaning now. There's no sense cleaning at the start. Now pretty much everything is out. The only thing we're going to do now is add more stuff in. But this is where you make a judgment call. How rusty is my pad? Do I care about the rust? And you know, really the choice is down to you and your preferences. Me, the rust doesn't look too great, but what I'm going to do is vacuum it, then make a little bit of a judgment call on what I want to do about the rust, or whether I should just ignore it completely. Okay, so let's take a look, see what we're dealing with. There's a bit of dust in there, not too much going on, some chipped paint. So a lot of the visible rust here, a lot of the visible orange, it looks like it's pretty much just dripped from this horrible corroded frame right here. Look at all that. That's awful, isn't it? Absolutely awful. I can't imagine it wouldn't have cost much more money to use something a little better in here, but as a result, this is what we're dealing with. If we look a little bit closer, is the rust eating into the metal? Is it a problem? Will it spread in the future? Do we care? Should we care? A lot of things to think about. But if I get my finger and just sort of rub that, you can see it almost rubs off the paint there. I'm thinking if I just wipe this over with some isopropyl alcohol or something like that, we're not really going to get any visible rust that we would really care about anyway. So to me, it's not looking too bad at all. I'm going to clean this up a bit more. Well, to be honest, the rust doesn't look too bad, but when I started looking a little further, it's not too great. To be honest, you know, 90% of people are going to slap on the bracketless kit and carry on about their day. You know, it's really up to you. It's an individual decision. Do you want a rusty pad? Maybe you're only going to own the pad for 2 more years. Is it worth your investment? It's not like it's a car or a truck where you get a rusty underbody, you keep driving on roads. It's something that's probably going to stay in your house. So really the question is, does it matter? So you have a few options here. What I've done, I've pretty much removed everything. It's just nuts and bolts. It's very easy. We already went through one arrow right here. We're just removing the circuit board here, which is just a few cables, one for each arrow, and then there's the power cables that come through the tube. What I'm going to do, I don't think I want this sandblasting. There's a couple reasons for that. Number one, it's quite expensive. Number two, when they sandblast this, they're going to be blasting inside these holes as well. These are the channels where your cables live, so all the way in there. But then how are you going to paint that again? So you're going to have paint and surfaces primed and ready for paint, but you can't actually access in there. So it's really, the choice is yours. What I've done is I've removed everything. I'm going to remove all the loose paint here. So I've got a couple of sanders. I'm going to remove all the loose paint I can see. When you paint something like this and prime it, all the work is in the preparation. If you fail the preparation, your paint job is going to be terrible. 90% of your efforts in repainting this is in the preparation. So we're going to sand it all down, remove all the loose paint, all the loose rust, and then we're going to use a rust converter on this. So unlike a rust remover, rust converter converts the rust into an inert object or inert substance. I think there's some instructions on there. It only takes 3 hours. It's pretty quick. So rather than removing the rust and potentially leaving it behind for it to spread and carry on, this converts it. It chemically converts the rust so it's not going to spread and get worse. So I'm going to paint this on once the surface is prepared. And then, yeah, we're going to go from there. So because the rust isn't really amazingly bad, I've dragged it outside so the sanding process doesn't ruin the whole, room. So the point of the sanding here is to get all the bubbles out the paint, all the loose rust, all the loose paint. You don't have to remove every single morsel of paint. You just need to make sure the surface is smooth, even, and not loose. And then we're ready to apply the rust converter. So these are the sanding discs I'm using. They're aluminium oxide, so it's a little bit stronger than your typical kind of sanding discs. You start in a low grit like this to get most of the paint off and make it smooth, and then you'd go up to a 120 or a 240 to kind of get a smooth finish at the end. So always start low. I got a couple of these as well for the corners where the sander can't quite get to, and that'll pretty much fetch off everything in any nooks and crannies. And yeah, that's pretty much what we're using here to prepare the pad. So while we're sanding that one there, I'm looking at some of the parts inside. Some of these L brackets, it's going to receive the same treatment. Just going to sand it a little bit, rust converter, and spray them. Some of them I'm going to leave completely. You see there's no rust on here, there's some staining. I'm not even going to bother with that one. Probably the same with that one, perhaps. But something like this, definitely going to do. Looks really bad. These we're not even going to use them anymore. Not going to use those. These are plastic, don't need to worry about. But these we will be reusing, so same again, sand them up. Rust converter. Might be a little hard to get in there, but we can definitely get the rust converter in these channels and hopefully restore these. They look really bad, don't they? Wow. So the pad PCB, the IO here, I cleaned that up with a bit of rubbing alcohol. It looked pretty bad, but it was just kind of surface rust that was spilled onto there. The screws, I can replace those with wood screws. They look a bit rusted. Again, it's really how much effort you want to put into this, but if you want to clean any of the electronics here, use a high percentage of isopropyl alcohol. Anything over like 97 will be good with that. Then it'll also evaporate easy and not leave any residue or anything on the traces there. I think the real annoying thing with this is knowing when to stop. You have to kind of draw a line. I found myself cleaning these. I was like, what the hell am I doing? This is stupid. So this is my line. I'm not going to do any more stupid stuff. I've replaced all the rusty screws though. I don't want that to spread any more than necessary. But as far as cleaning, I think that's where I'm drawing my line. Okay, I think the sanding is complete. Don't look too bad, does it? Alright, let's drag it back inside. So everything's pretty much sanded and prepared for the primer, converter and the paint. I'm just going to get some regular furniture polish to remove any big pieces, dust, sand, grit, debris, aluminium, oxide pieces, to get it pretty much ready for the painting. Oh man, look at this one. Yeah, so we're gonna have to do a little wiring repair as well. I'm kind of glad I got this open actually. You can really see what's going on there. So looks like I'm gonna check all the wiring just in case. But it was playing fine. But if that grounds out against the chassis here, we're getting nothing. So it's good to fix some of this stuff now. Okay, all the bigger pieces are off now. I'm just going to give it a final wipe down with some isopropyl alcohol. Doesn't really matter what the strength is, to be honest. The point is we're just getting all the fine particles and dust off before we start converting the rust. That way there's nothing under the paint. It's going to get a nice solid sort of fixture and the paint job's going to look good. Okay, so step one with the treatment, rust converter. So we're going to be converting our rust into an inert substance. It sort of tells you how it works here. Only apply it to the actual rust itself. So that's whatever's left of the kind of orange stuff. There's small pieces all the way along here, all the way along here. It's pretty impossible to get it all off. So I'm just going to give it a nice smooth thing all the way through. After around 30 minutes, anything orange will turn into a black color, and that's how we know it's reacted and now the rust is inert and it's not going to spread as much. So I've just got a couple of paint brushes here, I've got a little washing up bowl and our converter, so we're going to start with that step. There's no way I'm going to ever remember where all this wiring goes, so I've just removed one harness at a time. So this one kind of threads through here, up here and down here, and then it's easy to remember. I can just work it one side at a time. If you get paint on the wiring, personally I don't think it's a really big deal. You can take it out completely if you really want to. I guess the choice is yours. So the rust converter is quite thick. You can get it in a spray can as well. It comes in all different forms. But if the rust doesn't turn into a black color after around 30 minutes, then you need to apply another coat. So we're going to get this over all the rusty areas, and that's going to prevent the rust from destroying the pad in the future. This bit's pretty bad all in here. So there's some down here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So we've had this converter on for about 3 minutes now. You can see it's already turning black. It's working with the rust. It's destroying its rust-like properties. And yeah, it happened super quickly. I was actually surprised. I thought I'd be waiting like 20-30 minutes. So the reaction is pretty fast. This rust converter here, this is what it looks like originally. You can see the color difference. And it includes a primer as well. I'll be applying a primer afterwards, but technically it's ready to paint afterwards. Okay, so I pretty much covered all the rust I could find on there. It was all under these L brackets in almost every square there, all along the edge. Because we sanded this so well, there's not really any rust left, so it seemed kind of weird to put it on there. When I put the primer on there, that's going to take care of that and protect it. But while that's working, we're going to have a bit of a break and work on cleaning up some of these panels. They'll probably go through pretty much the same process, to be honest, as the pad right there. A lot of it came off. There's a bit of pitting, but it doesn't look too bad. Okay, so for these panels, it was all kind of surface rust. What I'm going to do with this, you can use a rust remover. I think that would be best with these, or even the rust converter, doesn't really matter if it's still pretty bad. So for this one, I've got some epoxy primer. It's really good to use on cars and underbody components. So this is better than typical primer you might see in a normal paint shop. So I'm going to cover it with the primer. That's going to prime it. It's going to stick to the metal, but it also sticks with the paint that you're going to put on top of the primer. This color here, the Hammerite Smooth Silver, is an exact match for these panels. Again, it doesn't really matter. You're not going to see this, so who cares, right? But as long as the rust is at bay and it's protected, that's all that really matters. Okay, well, if you've never painted before, and I think everyone's painted before, right? 6 inches, maybe 8 inches. Start here and go all the way past to the end. Then you get nice even coverage. You're less likely to get orange peeling, dripping, and things like that. Don't do this. Don't do this. You end up with a terrible paint job. So something like this. And that's it. If you don't cover it the first time, don't worry. Come back in a couple minutes and go again. Okay, it's been drying 15 minutes. Let's go again. So the primer's all on there now. Looks nice, doesn't it? Look at that. So we're just going to hit these with some silver paint now, and pretty much repeat that same process for the pad itself. It's looking a lot better now. Wow. It almost looks like a new pad again. Okay, so everything is primed and ready to go. It looks so much better than before, didn't it? You can see I didn't bother taking the cables out. You might want to do that. To be honest, I don't think it really matters. I don't care. And yeah, the paint, smooth white, Hammerite. Very good paint. A little bit expensive, but you know, you're probably going to be doing this one time, hopefully. So let's get going. Okay, that's pretty much as good as we're gonna get it. I don't really want to prepare it like I'm gonna eat food off it. In reality, it's gonna be underneath everything and it's never gonna see the light of day. But the point is, the rust isn't gonna grow anymore. Everything is flat and even for the panels. That's pretty much the primary concern. But way better, looks way better than it did before. Okay, so I'm just inspecting the wiring now. I mean, the wiring looked pretty good. The only one I could find out of everything is this one here. It looks pretty bad. So I'm gonna fix that up. I've got some supplies here. Alright, so let's give this a bit of a repair. So I put some vacuum hosing on there. That'll pretty much keep everything great. I'm gonna push it way out the way because when you solder these, this tends to shrink and you can't slide it over anymore. When I'm soldering, I almost always use flux. It just lets it get a little bit hotter and gives you a nice seal. Also lets your solder kind of spread out as well. You're not left with clumps, and it's really useful if you have a cheap soldering iron. I'm using my fingers because I only have one hand while I'm filming. So if you want to learn to solder, I have a video on my DIY channel. You can check that out. I'll try and remember to link it below. But once it's pretty much cool, we're gonna pull these over here, and this is gonna cover up pretty much everything. We're not going to need to worry about anything grounding out, and we're not going to have to worry about potentially losing one of our sensors. Well, that's all the wiring done. Let's get assembling. So the first thing I'm going to do is connect up the I/O board, because I kind of got a bit lost where some of these sensor sockets went. That way I can plug it into the official game and work out which arrow triggers what. So we're going to put this board in. To get the board into the metal here, Andamiro loves to use self-tapping screws that you usually use on sheet metal. They look something like this, but these are pretty fried. Now these are 16 mil. They've had the ends grinded off there. I think they were probably 18 originally, but they're super rusted. So I bought a little set here. It's M4 self-tapping screws, same kind of thing. We're going to be using these 18 mil ones, and then the pointy bit we can always angle grind that off afterwards, because anything that goes through here, through the pad, you can see on the underneath. So I think what they did when they manufactured this was they put all the screws in the bottom, flipped the pad over, then angle grinded all the points off. That's why a lot of the original Andamiro screws have the bottoms grinded off there. So I'm going with 18 mil on these ones, so we're replacing all the rusty ones that are in the I/O boards here, and also the sensor boards over there as well. Okay, so all the light boards are in there now with new screws in there, nothing rusted. The next thing is to put in these bracketless frames here. Now these are plastic, they're not going to rust like the original. Usually they come with these sockets that the screws are going to go into. If not, you can get them separately. If you don't have frames like this, then send me a message. I can hook you up with Andamiro Parts just like these, but this is such an improvement over the old design, and it's going to be a lot nicer as well in terms of rust. So we're going to lay all these out on the pad. So there's a little bit of a secret tactic when putting all of this together, and the secret tactic, it works with bracketed or bracketless setups, is to put everything in here loose. Don't tighten one down and then start tightening in turn. You have to put everything down, because the thing is, these are not made equally. And you will realize that the more you work on these. So you have to put everything in roughly where it goes, and then tighten everything down together. Sort of like when you tighten the lug nuts on the wheel of a car. You have to do everything in turn, and then it all comes down together. It's alright, isn't it? Look at that. Wow. So I think these bracketless conversion kits should come with some replacement screws, because the ones you remove from the old ones, these are M5 by 10 millimeters. They include a crush washer and also a normal washer as well, sort of leaving you around 8 mil to put the corners of the brackets, so the very corners there, into the frame. But because the new bracketless conversion panels, well, the hole inside there is 10 millimeters off the bottom there, and then they still also have to make their way through the frame, and you're going to need some washers as well. So with that, you're going to need at least 12 mil. So I went with these 18 mil M5 bolts here. It's a hex head. I guess the hex doesn't really matter. These are stainless steel, and also some M5 washers as well, and that's going to let us bolt these bracketless frames onto the frame itself. If you're not going to de-rust your pad, I recommend some aluminium anti-seize lubricant. I use it on cars all the time. It's really good stuff. Just put a little on the threads of pretty much any screw you're going to put in your pad and leave there, and when you come to take that out, they're going to be very easy to remove. Okay, so everything's screwed down. If you're gonna buy new sensors, then I recommend new sensor holders, because the new sensor holders are actually shallower than the original ones. So if you're going to replace one, you might as well replace pretty much everything. You can't just replace one of these on one arrow, then it'll kind of be crooked. So new sensors, new sensor holders. But with these new designs, it's so much easier. Look, that's it. So they're not glued down onto the metal anymore. They pretty much just go into the slots here, and that's pretty much it. I like the design a lot better than the old one. It looks so sleek as well. So these are the newest Andamiro sensors right now. It pretty much has the same pump connector. You can rewire a DDR1. It's basically just a switch inside. If you're not sure which way these go, it's pretty easy. You can see the 3 screws here which hold the L bracket on. That needs to be in the center of the pressable piece. So this bit where it says Andamiro isn't actually a sensor, part of the sensor. The only bit that squishes down is from this line to this piece right here. So that those 3 holes have to live in the middle of the sensor. So you can see there, the middle of the sensor's there, it goes that way. Contrast the other way, you put it in that way, you can see the L bracket is actually going to squish on the very end, and you're not going to get a good sensitivity. So that's how you know which way they go. So there's a funny story actually. We had some pump it up machines in Babylon Park in central London, and everyone was fighting to mod the machine. It was like, who has the most power, you know? It's almost like when you're in prison, it's like a power play to own parts of the yard. So what someone did, a certain somebody who represents, well, the UK/Ukraine at the big one, she went in the pads and rotated every single sensor so they were facing down like this. And when we realized it wasn't really working properly, opened up the plexi panels and we're like, what the hell? All the sensors were upside down. So she ended up getting banned, I think, from modifying the machine. But yeah, I guess it's easy to think why you would put it in that way, but it's anyone that's been playing this game longer than 6 months knows that's the way they go. So if you decide to use rust remover and not bother buying any new screws or bolts or anything there, then it's very abrasive. It's going to take pretty much anything off there, even some of the factory coating. Once the rust remover is all done, you can rinse it with normal water, then spray it down with some oil or WD-40, something like that, and that just further protects it in the future. So you can sort of spray them down, toss it like a salad. And you can keep these in a plastic bag or something for whenever you want to use them. Simple as that. So there's something interesting about this pad. It's going to be different on DDR. It really depends what kind of pad you're working on. But I noticed the very first version of the Andamiro pad uses self-tapping screws. It's almost like a wood screw, but it's used to join sheet metal together. They use it around the perimeter of the pad as well. But if you look at those holes in here, there's actually 2 threads in there. So when they were first tapped, there's 2 threads. So you could potentially use an M4 machine screw, which may be better than what they originally had in there. But by any case, don't use a wood screw in there. The thread pitch is different and you can actually ruin these holes. So either go self-tapping like it was before or an M4 machine screw. So it's M4 either way. Be careful they're not too long because it could go into the wiring by accident. So it's just a couple of things to be wary about. But all the L brackets have been painted, cleaned, and put on. We got the sensors on there. We got the switch frames, the black frames, and now it's pretty much just a modding session. Modding is really an art form. There's no right or wrong answer for that. This isn't a modding video. I do have a modding guide. I'll link it in the description below. You can check that out. But we're almost there. The lights, I'm going to do a separate video on those. We have some of the original neons, but I think like a LED upgrade might be a bit better. They are a bit brighter as well, but that's for another video. So we're just going to finish up here now. So we've got brand new replacement bars for these from Andamiro. Look pretty cool, don't they? The old ones are absolutely knackered. So there's two types of bars. There's the earlier bars where you have a slot in here and it gives you sort of two posts. They're about this high and then you can slot a bar on. And you have some hex keys in the back. But those are really bad. They wiggle a lot. So these ones are like one solid piece now. They changed the design so it's very similar to DDR now. So these are a lot better. Again, if you want Andamiro Parts, send me a message.
Yeah, okay, better.
So what's quite interesting, I don't remember if I mentioned this before, but Andamiro used an acrylic sheet, not a polycarbonate sheet. You can see it's 100% PMMA. That's quite interesting. Polycarbonate is a lot more durable than acrylic. Maybe there's a reason. Or maybe they're just cheaping out, I'm not sure. But I think certainly if I got these done myself, I'd use polycarbonate. But I think for the most part, it probably doesn't matter. Unless you're super heavy, that is. And you're doing knee drops and things. Okay, and that is how to convert a nasty, rusty, original pump pad to a brand new gleaming bracketless setup. What do you think? It's not bad, is it? Look at that. Wow. One thing I need to mention is these will need countersinking because the new panels, they're slightly indented here where the metal is. I have a dedicated video on countersinking dance pads. It's the best one on YouTube. I highly recommend you check it out. I'll put it in the description below so you can countersink the holes. You'll be looking at countersinking 2, 4, 6, 8. There's not really any point countersinking the far end of the pad, but there is a real point in countersinking the middle of the pad here and also along this strip as well. The video covers this as well. You could remove this strip if you want to, but it's quite nice just to countersink all the way down and not have a horrible white strip going down the middle of your pad. So that's how to countersink. Check out that video. I'm not going to cover it in this one. So everything's back together. We were pretty much where we started at the start of the video, except both of them are finished now. Look at that, it's cool, isn't it? Wow. And if you're wondering, I never put those back plates on because they're just super annoying to remove when you want to change out the bar. Other than that, if you pulled all the wiring out the pad, then you might have accidentally put them in the wrong way around, so it's good to check that the sensors correspond to the right ones. We accidentally switched those two, so it's pretty easy to do. And also plugging them back in the I/O as well, that can flip things around, so maybe before you put everything back together, it'll be good to double check that from the electronics point of view. Oh, look at that, bad bootlegs. Alright, well, that is how to convert a dying old pad into something more playable for your average pump player these days. It's alright, isn't it? Wow. And that pad was rusted too. Okay, well, I'll leave you with NX. The best mix in the whole game.